Hello and good morning. It's just turning 10 o'clock right now. I wanted to say a quick hello. I'm thrilled to be here. We're going to give everyone a minute to log on and kind of get comfortable and ready. And I'll say a few brief words, but really introduce our amazing group of panelists here today. I feel very fortunate to be in their presence. We're talking today about innovating the present for a sustainable future, bold, brave, and boundless, and women leading innovation across the world. And I wanted to say a quick welcome and hello. I'm Amanda Smith, the president of the Fairchild Media Group, which includes Women's Wear Daily, Beauty Inc., Footwear News, and Sourcing Journal. I am thrilled to be here today and truly honored to lead a conversation around a topic that's close to my heart: innovation and shaping a better future with a focus on female leadership in science. And over the past 10 months, we have seen the pandemic disproportionately take a toll on women, job loss and health. But because of this fight against COVID, it's particularly important to focus on the essential role of women and women in science. I want to thank Bvlgari for promoting this panel and bringing us together. I have truly enjoyed the connections and hope you all have as well. Bvlgari has taken their support of women beyond wearing and loving exquisite jewels, and they have supported key research institutions and universities that are aiding the fight against COVID, but also fostering female talent across science. So just a little housekeeping, we will do a Q&A at the end. You can submit questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll have plenty of time to do it and eager to hear those questions. But now I want to introduce our group of panelists to you. First, I have Jean-Christophe Babin, the CEO of Bvlgari Group. Hello and good morning. Thank you. It's my morning, your afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Amanda. Nice to be with all of you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored to have Katie Ewer, Associate Professor and Senior Immunologist at the University of Oxford's Jenner Institute with us. Hello, Katie.
Hi there, thank you for the invitation.
Next, we have Leslie Vosshal, the Robin Chemers Newstein Professor of Neurogenetics and Behavior at the Rockefeller University. Welcome, Leslie.
Hi, Amanda. I'm so excited to celebrate Bvlgari today.
I am too. And we also have Eleonora Rizzuto, the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer, CSR Director of Bvlgari Group and LVMH Italian Brands. Welcome, Eleonora.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm very honored to be here today, this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. So we also have two very special guests joining us. We have Rebecca Mackinson and Frauke Moksch, Scholarship Award recipients from Oxford and Rockefeller Universities. We are going to also ask them a couple of questions toward the end. I'm excited to have both of them here and hear about their work and research. Hello to both of you.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Amanda.
So Jean-Christophe, we're going to start with you. From the very start of the pandemic, Bvlgari leaned in to fight COVID-19, offering resources and help. Can you tell us a little bit more about how and why?
Well, Bvlgari has ever been very much committed to corporate social responsibility, especially in arts and education. Arts, because we are a brand from Rome, and Rome is probably the richest city when it comes to art, but also the most demanding when it comes to restoring arts to their former glory. And since decades, Bvlgari has been founding a lot of projects with the Ministry of Art of Italy, with the City Council. And in parallel, we have also funded a lot of educational projects with Save the Children. We have, over 11 years, funded more than $100 million of educational projects across the planet, helping more than 2 million kids. And so when COVID erupted, we really realized that the future of mankind was very much about education, arts, but also health, which is a dimension which probably with the progress of the 20th century, we had been a bit taken for granted that health was there. And the last pandemic was in the 20s, 1 century ago. And therefore, as soon as it erupted, been lucky to be an Italian company producing fragrances. We had all the know-how overnight to turn the fragrance factory into a sanitizing gel factory. And think back 11 months ago, end of February, March, there was just no gel available, no gloves, no blues, no respirators. May look crazy, but it was. And therefore, we immediately, in 1 week, set up that new production, which we proposed to the Italian government first. It's our home country. And then to the Swiss government, because we have a lot of watchmaking and fragrance operations in Switzerland, and eventually to UK, as UK was the last, but probably the worst hit country by the first wave of the pandemic. And this was the first step for Bvlgari, donating in total 800,000 bottles of those gels to primarily protect medical staff, which was in front line in the intensive care units. And very quickly realized that it was good because it was a war against COVID that all our employees were very proud to fight themselves, to wage, because they were themselves going to the factory every morning, taking risk on their own health to protect the health of the others. And we thought that we needed, like on education, to turn that emergency initiative into a more longer term initiative on health, as we know that unfortunately viruses will come back. Well, first 19 is far from being over. We see those days with the so-called Spanish and South African evolution that we have a third wave. But also talking with scientists, realize that there might be COVID-28 or COVID-32 or whatever. And therefore we decided to create a fund, the Bvlgari Virus Free Fund, which is a multi-million-dollar fund with just two dimensions. One is really the direct contribution to the top universities' research, so namely Oxford and Rockefeller. So very honored, to have established a partnership with those two greatest of the greatest universities worldwide, but also more locally with a less known reality, but very important in Europe, which is the Spallanzani Hospital in Rome. It's the first, let's say, virus academy in Italy. And in parallel, following our educational commitment with several children, we decided that we should take advantage of this Bvlgari Virus Free Fund also to provide scholarships. And I'm very happy today that we have two of the deserving students of that dimension of our support, Rebecca and Franke, as we believe that a better world will be made, obviously, of healthy, but also highly educated students and people. And we decided to dedicate it together with Oxford, together with Rockefeller, part of our funding to foster the accomplishment of some students who need, by definition, financial resources to pursue their dreams and vision, and maybe one day become Nobel Prize because they will have eradicated some terrible disease from the planet. So this is the vision. And like for education and like for arts, health is really a long-term commitment of Bvlgari, and is the third pillar of our corporate social responsibility, above and beyond, obviously, I would say the basic pillars in terms of sustainability, ethics, and so forth. So this is how it started. And the only other point I would mention is that it was pretty unique in the world of our luxury, because as you can imagine, our luxury has been pretty much hit by the crisis. First, the stores were closed in most of the world, except grocery and drugs. And second, obviously, when you have such a crisis really threatening your health, even your lives, unfortunately, 2 million of people have perished, perhaps jewelry or watches or bags are not your first priority. So we found ourselves in a dire financial situation. However, we decided to go beyond that, and with our cash reserves, anyhow, to create that fund, because we thought that as a citizen of that planet, we had to go really beyond the short-term constraints and contingencies. And with the full support of our shareholder, LVMH, we engaged into that pretty 360 approach to the COVID challenge. And I'm very glad we're into it. I'm very glad today that we can celebrate already one big step with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccination. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. I have to tell you, I get chills when I think about employees going into the factories to convert fragrance into hand sanitizer, and really the initiative you've taken, with the donation of a microscope to hospital in Rome and with this big fund. We'll talk to Katie and truly Rebecca in a moment, but before we do, tell us a little about the news on the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine.
Oh, sorry?
Of the latest news on the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. There's some.
Well, I think obviously Katie can talk much better than I. It's a vaccination. Well, first, we are very proud as Bvlgari to have modestly contributed to the testing phase of that vaccination. We know that testing is very important when it comes to vaccination. And I'm not a scientist at all, but when I compare it to the other existing vaccination, first, I'm very happy that there are many vaccinations available, because in the short term, we need as many as possible. The COVID is really a true challenge to the health and the economy of the planet. And in the longer term, I'm very happy and proud to be associated with Oxford AstraZeneca, because from a cost standpoint, it is apparently the most affordable, which is very important, as 2/3 of the planet is made of emerging countries where the living standards do not necessarily allow you to pay 40 euro, 50 euro for vaccination. And B, in terms of logistics, it's also apparently the easier to handle. You don't need, to go at -80 degrees to store it, which obviously enables it in terms of potential to be used everywhere with very little equipment, and very often equipment existing in every doctor or chemist or even at home. So I'm very glad that this vaccination is this profile, which is quite different from the first two, which have been hitting the markets. But I'm sure that this one not only will help immediately, I'm glad it's already operating in the UK, and I'm just impatient to see it in the other European countries. And this is a question I will ask them to Katie. What are we missing so that it's homologated also in the rest of the European Union? And in the longer term, I'm sure that this will be the more universal one, just for the reasons I mentioned. So hats off to all the Oxford teams for that achievement.
Well said. Well, we're in front of Katie Ewers, and truly, I think when everyone met her, we all said the same thing, which is congratulations and thank you. We are honored to meet you and to chat with you. You have been working nonstop with a team to develop this vaccine. Tell us about the experience overall.
Yeah, so I'm a part of a very big team here at Oxford, made up of lots of different specialists within their areas. There are people who work on the basic design of the vaccine and understanding how viruses work. There are people who are specialists in the type of vaccine technology that we use. There's my clinical trials team. There's the regulatory side. There's so many different components to making all this work. And what's been most amazing is seeing all these different little teams come together in this hugely interdisciplinary way, and for all of it just to work to get us to where we are today. I mean, it is still amazing to me that it's only really a year since we had the genetic code of this virus, and yet here we are with not just one, not just two, but 3 approved vaccines, able to be distributed. And I think it's a testament to what science can achieve when all the barriers are taken away, and when you have these really specialist teams all coming together to combine their skills and their experience and all of the knowledge that they have to one very focused kind of endeavor.
Yeah, the speed has been truly breathtaking. I mean, I think, to your point, just under a year, this is a huge feat. Tell us the difference between the Oxford vaccine and some of the others.
Okay, so where I'm based at the Jenner Institute, vaccines are what we do. And because most of the diseases that we work on are diseases of poverty that primarily affect low and middle income countries, we tend to work on diseases that the big pharmaceutical companies perhaps are less keen to commit a lot of resource to. So, our key programs are things like malaria, HIV, and tuberculosis. And in order to make vaccines available to be useful to vaccinate so many people, we have to employ platform technology. And that's a very useful way of doing it for 2 reasons. Firstly, it means that whenever we want to design a new vaccine, we don't go back to the drawing board. So the backbone of what we are making is the same whether the disease is coronavirus or malaria. And that helps us iron out all of the logistical issues, like, you know, how we make it able to be stored in the fridge, how we're able to develop manufacturing processes that can be used to produce hundreds of millions of doses. And as Jean-Christophe mentioned earlier, this is a key part of the technology. And it also helps us work out how to keep the costs down, because we do everything the same way every time. And that's really important to us. But I think having that kind of technology in place really makes this very adaptable and very suitable for rolling out for large-scale deployment for whatever disease it is.
That's exciting. You mentioned briefly some of the other vaccine work you've done, and I think it's an incredibly important piece of how you came to find a vaccine for COVID-19. Tell us a little bit more about the other work you've done in the vaccination space.
Yeah, so I actually more of a specialist in malaria vaccines. I've been here for about 12 years working on lots of different types of technologies, because malaria is a really complicated disease. It kills probably in the region of 500,000 children in Africa every year. It's a huge burden on global health. It has a huge economic impact as well. And the evidence for the impact that a malaria vaccine could have is undeniable. So for the first 8 years that I was here, I've been working mostly on malaria vaccines, and we still have a very busy and very full malaria vaccine pipeline going through development. So we also have a phase 3 trial on malaria happening alongside all the work we're doing on COVID as well. But I've also worked in other emerging pathogens. So I worked on Ebola vaccines during the Ebola outbreak, and we still have an Ebola vaccine program now that runs alongside the work we're doing. And some of Rebecca's work for her Bvlgari project will also pull in some of that experience as well, because one of the things we're really interested in is how we take these vaccines and deploy them. So for example, with COVID, we know that we have, 70 to 90% efficacy today, but how long will that efficacy last? Will we be reboosting people every year, every 2 years, every 5 years? So what we're doing now is going back to the people we vaccinated 5 years ago in the Ebola cohorts and saying, okay, if we give them a dose now, what does that do to their immune response? So that background work on the platform technology, or this understanding of how the technology works, not just for COVID and not just for malaria, but that we can apply across the board, is really useful in helping to make this readily deployable for whichever disease we're working on.
Yeah, it's fascinating and really interesting to hear that, you're working on multiple vaccines at a time and kind of studying the post effects. Tell us a little bit about the approval process for a vaccine, in general, but really for COVID, as we're very curious about how that process went.
Okay, so there's two different ways that vaccines can be approved to be used. Most vaccines for things like childhood immunizations go through a full licensing application. They'll go to a national regulator. We hand over all of the data, they go through it, they come back and ask lots of questions, we answer the questions, they come back and ask lots more questions usually. Sometimes they are happy with the data package that's submitted, sometimes they ask for more work, and different countries have different requirements. Just because a vaccine is licensed in one country, it does not mean that it'll be licensed in another country. Countries take their own considerations into account when they decide whether to license something. The approvals process that we're seeing for COVID vaccines is slightly different, because these are being approved for emergency use. There isn't time to undergo a full licensing regulatory approach for COVID vaccines, because obviously we want to be able to use them as quickly as possible. So we've put together a massive safety data package for the COVID vaccine that we've developed with AstraZeneca, with safety data from well over 23,000 people now, which is actually much bigger than many vaccines that are licensed through the usual process. So although we've gone quickly, we've actually done a lot more safety work than has been done for other vaccines that have gone to market. But it's a slightly different process that allows approval in each country. So for example, the FDA in the USA will have different requirements to the MHRA in the UK, and it's completely independent and autonomous process.
It's a big challenge to navigate, I can imagine.
It is. That's part of the reason that we partner with AstraZeneca, because they are a massive multinational company and they have the resource that's required to do this. We're a small research institute. We don't have the manpower to take a vaccine through that process without their help.
And Cathy, when can we hope to have the availability worldwide beyond the UK of the Oxford AstraZeneca? Because it's such an interesting proposal for the reasons you mentioned, that obviously it would do only good to have it approved. So What are the hurdles to approval compared to the other two, which are already broadly approved?
So there's really two parts to that question. One is, as I've mentioned, it's down to the independent national regulators in each area to decide whether or not they're happy with the regulatory package. But then there's also the supply side. So one of the reasons that we partnered with AstraZeneca alongside this commitment to make the vaccine available not for profit was that they have the global manufacturing capacity to produce as much vaccine as possible. So for example, the Serum Institute of India, who are the world's largest vaccine manufacturer, they're aiming to be able to manufacture 100 million doses a month, which is huge. It's bigger than anything else. But we're still quite early on in the manufacturing process, and all of those manufacturing capacities are still coming online and building up, and we're going to see a rapid increase in the volume of doses available. But in terms of, which countries get doses, that's all handled by AstraZeneca. The approvals process is a nationalized process, and the rollout of this vaccine versus another vaccine is done by international governments. It's really beyond our kind of involvement in the vaccine deployment, I'm afraid.
That's a massive process. We'll take a different turn for a moment. We've talked a bit about gender equity in the workplace, and really, you are a notable female scientist, and there are many of you. How do we move more females into leadership positions in science?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we get asked a lot, what's it like to be a woman in science? And there are lots of us, there are lots and lots of women in science, but perhaps we're less visible because we tend to find it harder to get to the very senior leadership positions. And, really that has to come from the top of an organization, and it's part of the culture. And I think part of the reason that the Jenner Institute has such a strong female presence at the senior level is that we have fewer barriers, I think, to seniority, because there is a commitment to recruiting the best people for the job. And I mentioned a bit earlier about how we have these very multidisciplinary teams, small groups led by specialists in what they do, coming together to pull a big process together. So we really look to hire the best people in their area. And we're just very good at finding really good people, irrespective of whether they're male or female. And that's very much the culture of what we do. But there are well-known mechanisms for improving, female representation, making sure that selection panels have not just gender representation, but gender balance, making sure that appointments to senior positions are mandated to be, well, in my institution, it's a minimum of 30% to senior positions. And that really has a huge impact on the promotion of women to senior levels, because without that, it doesn't happen. And it's not that there are not many talented women here. It's just because of, the patriarchal nature of academia, I'm afraid. So it's getting better, but it's very slow. And I'm still slightly disappointed to be here in 2021, being asked, not necessarily in this forum, but generally, what's it like to be a woman in science? And, there are loads of us, but we've got a bit more work to do yet, I think.
Yeah, it's a tough question that I think, outside of science, women who have kids or families are often asked, how do you work and are a parent? And it's like, how do men do it? Leslie, you and I talked a little bit about some of the news early on in the global pandemic, and truly, finding that a lot of the people who were called onto news programs as medical experts were men. How do we get more visibility for women in TV spots and as experts within the field?
It was, and you're right, it was striking. There had been a lot of progress in getting women in visible positions before COVID, and then it all collapsed. All of a sudden, all of the people, all the experts were men, even though there's many talented virologists, experts like Katie Ewer. I didn't see Katie Ewer on TV, I don't remember. So I think the women are out there. I think it just takes a bit more effort. We are tribal, and so you tend to invite your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are explicit about that. There was the National Academy of Sciences, big podcast, thousands of people. And the men were like, well, I invited my friend from college and I invited my friend from down the hall. And then there's one lone woman virologist, and God knows how they found her. But I think a little bit more conscious effort to say, why don't we have the panel represent the diversity of humanity and not just have it be the guy from down the hall?
Yeah, I think you have to be thoughtful about it, which I think for a lot of people takes a moment of pause, but it's probably more important now than ever before. We talked a little bit about what makes Rockefeller so special. You know, you've been there for 20 plus years. You do a ton of phenomenal work, and certainly we'll talk about the Bvlgari Women in Science Fund in a moment. But tell me about your role and tell me about Rockefeller.
So Rockefeller is it's a tiny jewel on the Upper East Side of New York City, and we're very small. So we have only about 75 faculty, but we are so lucky to have won a huge proportion of the Nobel Prizes. You know, that's a marker of scientific excellence. Sort of every year we have a list of people who are likely to win, and we're often right. So I feel a little bit of pride. Another moment of pride is that we have about 75 labs, and starting right at the beginning of the COVID crisis, 1/3 of my colleagues pivoted immediately to working on some aspect of COVID-19. So a rapid response to the pandemic. And so that I was very impressed by people, you know, we're all vested in what we're doing, people to drop everything and convert all of their effort to fighting this terrible virus was impressive.
Yeah, it's been incredibly impressive. Tell us about the Bvlgari Women in Science Fund and truly the Bvlgari Clinical Fund as well.
Mm-hmm. So we are so excited to have this program for many reasons. So I'll start with Women in Science. So over 20 years ago, Rockefeller realized that a great way to build a diverse workforce to get women into leadership positions is to set aside, raise philanthropy for a fellowship program, so Women in Science Fellows. And we funded almost 250 of these fellowships. So why is it important? In most professions, if you hire someone, there is salary and they get paid. It's in basic scientific research, there actually isn't money until you decide to raise the money. So the 250 women who receive these fellowships have the ability to fund their own work. That gives them independence. So the professor they work for is delighted to host them because they bring their own money. It also gives them a great boost to their careers because they have these prestigious fellowships. And so I love that the Bvlgari Women in Science Fellows program has piggybacked on top of this already successful program, but funneled it specifically to women working in virology and immunology. And the three fellows named, Dr. Makandari, Ricardo Lax, and of course, Dr. Muksh, are shining lights who are already really changing how we think about and treat these diseases. And then the other big program, the Bvlgari Clinical Fund, funds two major groups that were already big players in the space of infectious disease. So Jean-Laurent Casanova for years has been trying to understand why some people are more susceptible to infectious diseases, why some individuals will have fatal responses to diseases. And he's figured out that there's genetic susceptibility. And he found that this is true for COVID-19 also. So if you have sort of an underlying genetic condition, you become much more susceptible to COVID. And that's super useful because you could go out and find who are the people who have these underlying susceptibilities because you want to protect them and give them extra special attention. And then the second major beneficiary of the Bvlgari Clinical Fund is Michel Nussensweig, who has been all over the news, justifiably. He's a world expert immunologist, and teaming up with Marina Kaski, a tremendously talented physician scientist, female. They have, over the course of the last 10 months, collected blood from people who have successfully fought off COVID-19. You know, they suffered from the horrible disease, but then they can help future people. And so Michelle and Marina have worked together to come up with neutralizing antibodies. What that means is that you would get an infusion with antibodies that have been taken from people who already fought this disease. And if you get that infusion, you will then successfully fight off the disease. So it's an incredibly important novel therapy, kind of an adjuvant to the vaccine. The vaccine prevents you from getting infected. If you are infected and you're about to become very sick, Michelle and Marina's neutralizing antibodies will do that. They will neutralize the virus. So these are really smart investments that Bvlgari has made in science at Rockefeller.
Yeah, and I, particularly striking that they're supporting women in these big moments, which I think we all appreciate. We've talked about this too. Women have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19, socially, economically. We're seeing a large number of women. I think we saw in December 140,000 women lost jobs, and it was truly, and a lot of mostly women of color, or all women of color, truly heartbreaking to see. How has this played out in the scientific community?
No, you're absolutely right. That jobs report was shocking. If you'd imagined in January 2020, all daycare centers will close, all schools will close, all restaurants will close, everything will close. That's affected all industries, but where it affects science, we have an incredible daycare on campus. And so also funded by our Women in Science program. So everybody is able to put from a 3-month-old infant to kindergarten, have their babies and toddlers taken care of while they were at the bench. Scientists don't have laptop jobs where we can be in our apartment and work productively. Most of what we do is at the bench. And so for all of these women who have an infant or a toddler, you're not going to be at the bench. It's not safe to be at the bench with your infant or your toddler. And so it has really set back not only science, but has set back the cause of women in science at least a year. I tell all the women in my lab, you've lost a year of your career. If you're updating your resume, there's just like a black box there, at least a year. So this is where, again, any source of external encouragement and validation, these fellowships is it really boosts the whole enterprise.
Yeah, it really does. Makes a huge difference. Jean-Christophe, tell us more about why Bvlgari decided to promote these scholarship funds at Oxford and Rockefeller, and a little bit more about the funds themselves. We've heard a bit from obviously Leslie and Katie, but more from you would be wonderful.
Well, it's very difficult actually when you are not a scientist or a medical company to make this kind of calls. So obviously, we discussed with many experts, starting with our friends at the Spallanzani in Rome, because we are Roman and we have long collaborated with Spallanzani, and Spallanzani was the first one to suggest that Oxford and Rockefeller would be at the forefront of the anti-COVID war research, and that additionally they would be quite complementary. Oxford being very famous for the antiviral research, and Rockefeller for the biomedical advances they've made, crowned very often by Nobel Prizes, and that probably with Oxford we would go more towards vaccination solution, and as Leslie just explained, with Rockefeller, probably curing the disease, because not everyone vaccinated will eventually be protected. We know that vaccination will protect 90% of people, but 10% still are to be cured. And before 90%, 100% of people will be vaccinated, anyhow, a lot of people will fall ill, and we see those days. And another aspect also of Rockefeller was interesting was the tests. Rockefeller is hardly working on easier to manage tests so that you can do it yourself from home without necessarily going to an hospital or to a doctor. And we know that in the fight against COVID, the earlier you know, the better. And so the capability through Rockefeller to soon access to do-it-yourself test will help also, to fight the disease. So we found a lot of complementarity, and we were very honored, that the two famous institutes, when we knocked at the door, were welcoming us, because we are not, the Bill Gates Foundation. We don't come with billions. We only come with millions. So it's a modest contribution. On the other hand, we were overwhelmed by, the quality of the people we met in both cases, and we were very excited, to be directly part of that adventure, which is obviously a very important adventure for mankind. We see how vulnerable we can be to a very, very tiny animal or virus, name it the way you want. And we obviously don't want that it happens again for ourselves, for our kids, and therefore to be associated to those great institutes for us was responsibility also internally. It has developed a lot of interest for the 7,000 Bvlgari employees. And the fact that most researchers involved were women obviously resonated very positive in Bvlgari. Bvlgari is a jeweler. And if I take the executives in Bvlgari, we talk about 500 people. More than 55% are ladies. The same way we have Eleonora together with us tonight, Alessandra. I'm a minority, an aging one. And I'm very proud, to be leading a luxury company which is predominantly managed and led by ladies. Not only because a lot of crafts we do are for ladies, jewelry first, but because, we acknowledge that ladies bring to the business dimension in terms of sensibility, in terms of intuition, which sometimes men do not do as smartly. On the other hand, we men have some other qualities. But we ever tried in Bvlgari really to have a balance. It's not a scientific balance, but for sure, Bvlgari is probably at the forefront of women empowerment when it comes to its management. And as a consequence, we do everything we can to promote women, generally speaking. For instance, a few years ago, we have created in Japan and now in China an award called Aurora. Aurora in Latin means dawn in English, and Aurora is meant to reward every year pioneering women in different fields, often not famous yet, but women who really have a vision, feel a mission, and thanks to the talent, to the commitment, are making big processes in very different fields, spanning from arts to science, to business, to medicine. And thanks to sponsors, and the sponsors are, I would say, very famous people in the Japanese society, in the Chinese society. Those sponsors are proposing those ladies to jury. Bvlgari is supposedly not part of the jury because we don't want to skew the result in any way. And each year the jury will decide some awards and cast a light on extraordinary ladies, which in turn hopefully will inspire other ladies really to try to achieve their ambition and to be less shy about daring in a society where often you have psychological barriers. You wrongly believe, and I think with Forker and Rebecca we have the good examples, but we wrongly believe that we're still living in a man's world, which in some ways can be true. On the other hand, we cannot deny that today the woman power is there, is growing, and obviously for a company like Bvlgari, it's very exciting. We need to be part of that journey proactively, not only internally when it comes to grow our management, but externally as well when we can foster women empowerment through initiatives spanning from the Gender Institute, the Aurora Awards in Japan, China, and soon in Europe and the US.
I want to turn for a moment to the two scholarship award recipients, and I'll start with Rebecca, the Oxford Scholarship recipient. We'd love to hear about the work you've done, the research you've been working with along with Katie and the larger team. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Katie brushed on this a little bit earlier in that before COVID-19, we were working on all sorts of pathogens, all sorts of diseases. And before COVID-19, I was working on different outbreak pathogens. So I was working on the Ebola vaccine program. And most relevantly to this, I was working on the MERS vaccine program. So MERS is a different type of coronavirus that emerged a few years ago. So I think that's how I got drafted into the vaccine project here at the Jenner. And before I started my PhD in October, I was working on the vaccine trial. So when we vaccinate our volunteers, we take some blood from them. So I was doing some sort of assays on the blood, looking at what immune responses we were getting from our healthy adults, what immune responses we were getting from our older adults, and how those immune responses were changing over the course of time. But since I started my PhD in October, I've taken a small step back from that sort of routine work. And now I'm doing some sort of detailed exploratory work on these samples that we've got.
Exciting. Sounds like deep work and really interesting work. Tell us what's been some of the surprising findings, either in COVID or your MERS work or your kind of deeper research, over the last many months.
Yeah, I think the most promising findings was when the efficacy results were announced a few months ago now. That was definitely the most exciting moment in the lab. Obviously, that's not my achievement alone, that was the achievement of the hundreds of people working on there, but that was definitely the most exciting moment for me.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it is to realize that it works, and that amazing feeling that you have as a group, and kind of, I'm sure, relief and celebration and all around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Frauke, tell us a little bit about your work at Rockefeller.
Yes, so actually before the pandemic, I worked on HIV, another virus. Most of the group that I work in did that. But the moment the pandemic started, we already thought about what can we add to it. And so we actually teamed up with 2 other labs on campus. So with Michelle Nussenzweig's lab, Leslie already talked about him, and with Charlie Rice's lab. And we formed this huge collaboration, which has been, it has been really a big opportunity, and it has been wonderful to see how so many people get together with very different expertise, but everyone sits in the same boat, everyone has the same goal. And all of these talented people come together, and we achieved so much actually in short time. So we've collected samples from patients who recovered from COVID-19. And there were different tasks. One was to explore the immune response, see how people react, how many neutralizing antibodies do they develop, which of course is also in the end correlating to how well will they be protected in the future, but also to isolate and find the most potent of these antibodies, and then to make them in cell culture and possibly develop them as a therapy. So we identified those antibodies in about April last year. And it's been really exciting to see how far this has gotten. So last week, actually, the first person has been injected with these antibodies. And so we're heading into the clinical trials right now. And to see this, especially coming from a basic research institution and not from a company side, that this is so fast, this is very special to us. And I've learned a lot in this past year. I'm a virologist working with a lot of immunologists now. And so this has been a great chance, and it has been really exciting to be part of it.
It seems exciting. So is there cross evidence, or is there evidence of cross immunity from previous infections with other coronaviruses?
There are many coronaviruses that we actually don't really notice they are there. We get infected with them all the time. So most of them lead to the common cold. Mm-hmm. And actually an MD PhD student in our lab looked into this, and he took samples from patients that were confirmed PCR positive with these seasonal coronaviruses, and look whether their plasma, so part of their blood, can neutralize SARS-CoV-2, and they could not. So there is no there seems to be no cross immunity from these infections. It's also not too surprising, because the viruses they are all coronaviruses, but they are still not that similar. So we were not very surprised to see this.
Interesting. I'm excited, Frauke and Rebecca, to see your incredible impact on the world, and hope this Bvlgari Scholarship Fund is helping you see a brighter future for yourselves. I would certainly think the work you're doing is outstanding. I want to turn a minute to Eleonora. Last but not least, have some questions. Eleonora, you've been at Bvlgari for 9 years and LVMH for 7. You focus on sustainability, CSR, ethics. Tell us about the role Bvlgari plays in helping support women and younger women empowerment, and how it aligns to create a better world.
Oh, it's a very good question. Thank you, Amanda.
It's a big question.
I listened very carefully to to everybody today, and I'm very honored because in 30 minutes I see all the job that we did in 9 months concentrated in our discussion. Because when I started in this group in the luxury, I believe that okay, we found a lot of women already into the place. I came from a sector where the 80% were men and 20 women. Now it's the opposite. We are, as Jean-Christophe told us, nearly 62% are Bvlgari managers are women, and the rest, so about 38 are men. So the situation is opposite. But I have to say that we don't see not only women at the focal point, focal position, because I was very impressed by what I think Katie or Leslie told us about the recruiting, the need of recruit the best people for a job. So if we concentrate ourselves on the best people, and we see that nowadays, fortunately, universities are giving us more and more women, we have been capable in Bvlgari to attract also women, because we are convinced, I think, also from the people like me, that I am a facilitator in the company, because I found Jean-Christophe and all the management, the top management, very concerned about women empowerment, general sustainability, and I will tell for 2 main reasons. But what I do is to track in the very short term the best solution to do things that can effectively happen. And this was something that was astonishing, because 2 aspects I would like to underline: the speed in which Jean-Christophe, March to 2020, started immediately to think about how to be on the field against this COVID, this pandemic, and immediately took contact with Spallanzani and immediately started to think about women empowerment programs. And today we can say we are at the position to say that even if we are dealing with luxury, we postpone our interest to a non-obvious field that is science for us, and did something. So the second aspect is this big area where sustainability for private sector must have more and more space. That means that partnership between public and private sector. That means that if a company like Bvlgari is dealing with luxury, wonderful products, we do dreaming women, okay? Because our products since long time are telling about that. But in the moment where our society as a whole has some big struggle like a COVID, it's ready in 2 weeks to give a response and to put together scientist programs with also the best way to do. And the best way to do for Bvlgari has been to find the best people for the job, and that means women. So some years ago, I read a book on middle-aged women in Italy, and you can guess that the first 2 women who were considered, different from the rest, has been scientists also in the Middle Age. So it's something that our societies are telling us. If you want to find, the competency, you have to find women in science, in medicine. It's like that. I don't know, but it's something that we found very, very with easiness. For Bvlgari programs, immediately when I started 9 months ago, I prefer to take the guidelines that we are available. And one of the most important is the United Nations guidelines on women's empowerment. And we took the most important elements and transported in the code of ethics. That means that in our company, but not only Bvlgari, also our suppliers. So you can imagine the multiplicatory effect of that has to apply to this way of see our business. So to be sure that we continue to arise the culture of inclusion, the culture of the respect of the individuality. So finding the best solution to see and to underline the capabilities of our women in general, professionals.
So how does a company like Bvlgari play a role in work-life balance and the success of female leadership at the company level? And certainly heard a little bit about how that's done at Rockefeller.
Yeah, in this moment, we look with very attention to safety problems, but also to find solution how to do some work balance about what it is, in fact, the charge of a job, because to do a good job, we have to work. So it's something that you can avoid with the charge that we have on families, but not only with children. We look at the female world, not only with children. We are in a society where we are also taking care of our grandparents and of our pets. The observation is who has in a community the most heavy charge in their activities. Okay, the answer you know very well. So we tried to do it easier this way. So we started, even if before this era, so 5 years ago, to try to take this easier. So we try to find solution for the mobility, for the sustainable mobility, because we are located in Rome. So we try to do better efforts for our colleagues to get their home back. And in these years, we improved the possibility to do our job by home, stay home. But listen, it's something very important that we try to keep the balance between this and that. So very recently, the CNEL, who is an organization in Italy specialized in job and labor, published a study where they saw, with the statistic in the hand, that the most charged category in the society has been in this COVID area, women and children, because they were bearing. Okay, we try also to invite women if they want to come back to the job site. So we try to do balance between these two needs, and I think this is the right key to continue to profit of the competencies, but balancing also with the rest of the thing. Sustainability means also to have in our head that life today is not only concentrated in one side, but is 360 degrees.
We're out of time today. It's been a true honor to meet and have a chance to speak with all of you. Thank you, Bvlgari, for bringing us together. Jean-Christophe, thank you so much. Katie, congratulations and a huge honor. Leslie, congratulations. Thrilled to meet you. Rebecca and Fraka, your work is incredible. And Eleonora, you're such a leader in this space. We're looking forward to seeing more. Have a lovely day, and thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.